Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at Book Passage for our conversations with authors. We have a very exciting hour teed up for you. My name is Cheryl Bronstein. I'm one of the event coordinators here. And again, a big welcome to Book Passage. We just love doing these virtual events. We can reach a lot of people, spread the word about great books, and just really appreciate you spending an hour with us. If you are new to Book Passage, well, welcome. We hope this will be the beginning of a very long relationship. We want to be your primary source for books. And of course, if you're one of our loyal customers, you've tuned in many times, welcome back. We could not do this without you. So your patronage is very, very much appreciated. Here at Book Passage, we are an independent bookstore. We have two locations. For those of you who may not know, we have our store in the San Francisco Ferry Building. And we also have our store in Corte Madera, California. Both stores are currently open 7 days a week for your shopping pleasure. So come on in, or you can call us up on the phone. You can buy your books that way or order on our website. Again, we are here to help you to serve all your book needs. We also have a very active corporate program. If you are a business owner out there and you are interested in purchasing books in bulk for your staff or for your clients, give us a call. We can offer very attractive discounts and we ship all over the country. Happy to do that. We love that business and we are the premier player there. So we have a very active winter programming set up for you all. Please take a look at our website. It is bookpassage.com. We have many in-person events. We have virtual events. We have lots of classes. So many things going on in our Book Passage community. And again, to find out all that information, you should look at bookpassage.com. I am just going to mention a few of the very exciting events that we have going on. We have an in-person event with the amazing poet Billy Collins. And Mr. Collins will be in our Corte Madera store this Saturday, November 12th at 6 p.m. to present his newest work, poetry, Musical Tables. We also have a virtual event with a very funny Steve Martin on Wednesday, November 16th at 4 p.m. Again, that is a virtual event. And Steve will be discussing his new book, Number One is Walking, My Life in the Movies and Other Diversions. And he'll be touching on his legendary career, his 40 years in the movie business, as well as his stand-up comedy, banjo playing, writing, cartooning, and many more. It should be a hoot. He's always unpredictable and always very funny. So please tune in. Again, tickets to these events are still available. You can get them on our website, bookpassage.com. So look at our calendar. We don't want you to miss any of the great things we have going on in the next month. Here at Book Passage, our mission is to enrich, engage, and inspire. And thank you to our customers to let us do that. Book Passage has been a Bay Area institution and a family-owned business for over 40 years. We are very proud of that. We hope to be around to serve you for another 40 years. Well, Book Passage mystery fans are cheering. Lady Georgiana Rannoch and her dashing husband, Darcy, are back in the latest installment of the Royal Spyness series. Rhys Bowen has hit it out of the park once again with this wonderful new edition titled Peril in Paris. Rhys Bowen is a New York Times bestselling author. She has been nominated for every major award in mystery writing, including the Edgar. She's won many, including both the Agatha and the Anthony Awards. She is the author of the Royal Spyness mysteries set in 1930s London and the Molly Murphy mysteries set in turn of the century New York, and the Constable Evans mysteries, which was set in Wales. She has the blessed opportunity to write mystery books with her daughter. I can't imagine a greater privilege. And I'm sure that was a wonderful experience. And I hope maybe we can even hear about that today. She was born in England and now divides her time between Northern California and Phoenix, Arizona. So she's got a great setup, and we are so glad that she is with us this afternoon. She is a celebrated member of our Book Passage Mystery Writers event. She is a true friend of Book Passage, and we are honored to be the place for many of her book launches, including this one. Rhys is joined today by the amazing Cara Black. Now, Cara is author of The Murder at Porte de Versailles, She has written over 20 books that have been on the New York Times bestselling list, including the Amy Leduc series, as well as the thriller 3 Hours in Paris. She has received multiple nominations for the Anthony and the Macavity Awards. Her books have been translated into German, Norwegian, Japanese, French, Spanish, Italian, Hebrew, and I'm probably leaving out many other languages because these are read around the world. She lives in San Francisco with her husband and her son, and she visits Paris frequently. And I understand she was just there. So maybe we can hear a little bit about her recent experiences. She is one of the honored Mystery Writer Conference faculty members. Again, another true friend of Book Passage. She has her book launches here. We are very grateful. Living locally, we get to see her often, and it's a wonderful opportunity. So please give a very warm welcome to two of the very best mystery writers of our day, Rhys Bowen and Cara Black. Welcome.
Thank you, Cheryl. Hi, everybody. Hi, Cara.
Thank you. Hi, Rhys. Thank you, Cheryl. We're so happy to be here because the last time I saw Rhys was in Paris a few weeks ago.
Sounds like a song title. The last time I saw Rhys was in Paris. Yeah,
it was. And it was. We were in an outdoor cafe in the Marais. And tell them what happened. We were sitting outside. We'd arranged to meet. And you kept saying, I feel like I have a cold, and everybody has a cold around me, but I don't want to get too close to you. So we were sitting outside at the cafe.
And it was a cold day. It was raining. It was cold, but we sat outside. And yeah, I had a cough and just a stuffy nose. And I just didn't feel great. But I tested that morning and I was negative. So I said, I'd been to the pharmacy, and in the pharmacy in Paris, it's not like pharmacies in America. An old dragon of a lady comes out and she says, what's wrong with you? And you say, I have a cough. And she goes, is it a dry cough or a wet cough? And she asks all these questions. And then finally she takes you to a shelf and she says, this is what you're going to have, whether you like it or not. You say, thank you. So she'd said to me, everybody in Paris has a cold right now, madame. So Cara and I sat and had a nice coffee together, although it was a bit cold and wet. Anyway, so a few days later, I went back to London, still coughing, tested again, and this time I tested positive for COVID. So when I'd been sitting with her, I'd been breathing COVID germs on her, not knowing. And that was the interesting thing to me, was that I was at my most contagious when I tested negative. So who knows how many other people around the world have gotten infected during the last couple of years when they tested negative. So
exactly, but you were wearing your mask, which I really appreciated, and I didn't test positive, so thank you for being cautious.
Well, luckily, you just had it, right? You'd had it a couple of months before, so that was a good thing. But I was worried after that. But, I emailed you instantly and said, "Are you okay?"
I was like, "Yes, thank you." Yeah. But we're here to talk about this wonderful book, Perils in Paris, which is Lady Georgina's 16th story. Of course, that's not counting the novella, the Christmas novella, I believe.
Yeah.
But now Lady Georgina is expecting a bundle of joy, and Darcy, her husband, is whisked her off to Paris to stay with her friend who's working at Chanel. But I'm going to let you tell us a little more about what the story is about, Rhys.
Yeah. Okay. Well, at the end of the last book, which was called God Rest Ye Royal Gentlemen, which was obviously by the title a Christmas book, and it took place at the Royal House of Sandringham, where the royal family always spends Christmas, and still does actually. And the book ends with a couple of rather shattering pieces of news. One is that King George V dies. It's January 1936. He dies, and then his son, the Prince of Wales, now finds himself being King Edward VIII, which is a job he really doesn't want, but he's got it anyway. The other thing they find out is Georgie's been a little bit out of sorts over Christmas, and it turns out that she's pregnant. She's thrilled, Darcy's thrilled. So that's how we left the last book. But we pick up a few months later, and Georgie has not had the best time of it. She's had horrible morning sickness. She's stuck in the country at their house while Darcy's off doing things. And so she's been a little bit on the depressed side, I think. Is this what pregnancy is all about? And is this what life's all about? And then suddenly one morning the sun is shining, it's spring, and she feels much better, and she's sort of hopeful again. She's got the job of, the other thing at the end of the last book is they each give each other a puppy for Christmas, unbeknownst to the other one. And so they've got these two very naughty lab puppies called Holly and Jolly. So that's the one job she's had, is trying to train them, not with too much success. And then it's springtime and she can take the dogs for walks and she feels much more optimistic. And then Darcy comes home one day and says, "You've been looking a bit peaky. Would you like to go to Paris?" Well, who wouldn't? So she thinks, what a nice, lovely idea. Haven't I got a kind husband? She should have thought that when he's taken her somewhere in the past, there's usually an ulterior motive to it. But anyway, Belinda, her best friend, is in Paris. And we know from past books that Belinda has a great flair for fashion design, and probably would have worked as a fashion designer all her life, except that she's always been quite rich. But she's apprenticed herself to Chanel to sort of hone her skills. And she's written to Georgie to say, I wish you were here, but it's crazy at the moment because we're having our big spring fashion shows are coming up. So Georgie goes off to Paris with the thought that she'll stay with Belinda for a few days. So that's really how we get started in this book.
Right. And we're in 1936, before the war, before many things happened. And I think we were talking about, since we were both in Paris, you and I had both been at different times at the Schiaparelli show, the designer Schiaparelli. And of course, you bring it up here in the book with the mermaid dress that we both actually saw, at the museum. It's just kind of amazing.
Yeah.
But and then this rivalry between which we see later in the book, between Schiaparelli, she was kind of a surrealist or a Dadaist, and Chanel, who was much more like a businesswoman, right, in different styles. I thought that was so intriguing.
Well, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because Schiaparelli has gone really over the top with her designs. There's sequins and there's feathers and everything you can possibly think of. And then there's Chanel, who's very much structured, very masculine in many ways. The suit jacket, the classic pearls. Because she's got such a wonderful figure, a very boyish figure herself, I think, she designs for herself, really. So these lines look wonderful on the slim, elegant woman. And so the two of them are in very different directions. Although, of course, I do my research for these, and I found out that in her collection this year, she did have this fantastic gold lame dress that was completely form-hugging from, I think it had a hood even, so from the hood all the way down to the feet. It looked as if you literally had been dipped in gold. So that's going to be the highlight of the collection. And there are going to be two ladies who might be fighting over that in the book, which is kind of fun too.
Oh yeah, all these things about fashion and haute couture is just wonderful, and about the people who come. And that's another thing too, how you bring out there at the Ritz, and what is it like to go in the Ritz? I mean, I've gone actually to the Hemingway bar, which is wonderful. It's been redone. But there is that special feeling about the Ritz. It's the classiest or the hotel in the world. I mean, there could be others, but it has such a character, and it really comes out in the story. I love that.
Yeah, well, because also Georgie, even though she's related to the royal family, and for anybody watching who doesn't know about her, perhaps I should probably fill in the background. Her father was Queen Victoria's grandson, and he married her mother, who was a very famous, very gorgeous actress, but from a very humble background. So Georgie has grown up in a castle in Scotland, which was where her father lived. And she's really been very sheltered from the world and very naive until she takes life into her own hands and flees down to London to make her own way. But her other side of the family, we see her mother in most of the books. Her mother is still a gorgeous woman who is the quintessential bolter. She has moved from man to man to man all her life. As I say in one of the books, she has been many things to many men on 6 of 7 continents, Antarctica being too cold. So we know it's the sort of life she's lived, but she's currently with a very rich German industrialist. She does like to be spoiled. So she's got a life at the moment in Germany, which we might find out more about in this book. So, but Georgie also has a wonderful grandfather who has been a Cockney policeman. So she has this very lower class, very warm and wonderful grandfather who lives in a little house with gnomes in the front yard, in contrast to her other grandfather who has now died, but whose ghost plays the bagpipes on the ramparts of Castle Rannoch, you know. So Georgie, I think, is a good sleuth because she's poised between two worlds. And as such, you're always an observer. You know, if you're when we go to Paris, we notice things. If you're a Parisian, you walk right past and you don't notice. But so Georgie is a really good observer. So that's her background anyway. So
right, and we meet her grandfather, her maternal grandfather, at the beginning of the book, and he is very down to earth, and he, you know, it's, you can see where she gets her grounding there, and he's lovely, and then she feels sad that he's, you know, he feels out of place also, you know, in their country estate, and he wants to go back where he feels comfortable. So I think that's really, you know, and then we see the, you know, you so very skillfully bring out the class structures, you know, as well. That's just part and parcel, right, of that time. Maybe
well,
still.
yeah, that's why he feels, you know, he's grown up, he's lived a very humble life, and now Georgie has not inherited, but she's living in her godfather's mansion, and there are servants and there's a protocol and they sit in the morning room and all these things. He's not comfortable at all because he's not a servant and he hates being waited on, but where does he belong? So he, even though he likes the food there and he likes looking out of the windows, you know, it's not his world. And I think all through all of these books, the whole, you know, one of the themes going through all of the books has been the class structure in England, and the fact that, you know, there still is an awful lot of, well, there's still today an awful lot of feeling of class in England. You know, it's still there, which amazes me. I mean, it always amazed me that when Prince William married Catherine, they almost broke up for a while because she was deemed to be too lower class because her mother used the word toilet instead of lavatory. And that's a lower class world. And everybody went, oh no, she couldn't possibly marry. No. So, I mean, that really mattered. There were headlines, there were double page headlines in British newspapers calling it Toilet Gate. Luckily, they cared too much for each other and they just went back together, which was really nice. But, you know, the fact that these days it does matter about class. I've been at a sherry party in the Cotswolds, which is a very snooty area. And the person giving the sherry party says, my dears, you will never believe who bought that house across the valley. And everybody leans close and says, do tell. And she said, my dears, he's a grocer. And everybody went, oh. And, you know, it wouldn't have mattered if he'd owned Safeway. To them, he's a grocer. So again, you know, I live in America now, and thus I'm the observer. So these things really, really tickle me. You know, sometimes they're so outrageous, you want to go, seriously, that really matters to you? But in England, it does. So it's kind of, you know, a lot of obviously these are humorous books, and a lot of the satire is about the silliness of the class system.
Oh, especially Queenie, who's my favorite, when she's describing her, yes, the maid, the walking disaster area. And here Queenie's very upset because she doesn't get to go to Paris because she was Georgie's lady's maid. Now Georgie's got her down in the kitchen and she's turning out okay, good cook, right? But Queenie, the walking disaster area, is you know, very, I like her a lot, and she doesn't get to go to Paris. Too bad. But yeah, so I mean, they talk about, you know, the upstairs, downstairs, and how the puppies have to go and be trained when Georgie can't, you know, handle it anymore, and because they have tiled floors, right?
Yeah.
Having trained puppies myself, I wish I'd had a, you know, staff downstairs.
Downstairs, yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
That's a good thing about servants too. You can say, can you come and clean up after the puppies, please? You know, you don't have to do it yourself. But yeah, Queenie's a character. She, for those of you who don't know, she was Georgie's lady's maid, and now she's a sort of an interim cook, shall we say. But people either love Queenie or they hate her. I get emails all the time saying, get rid of Queenie, I can't stand another minute with her. And then other people go, oh, I love Queenie. She really is, mean, she's the maid you love to hate because she's completely clueless. She is a walking disaster area. You know, she can set fire to things and knock over things. And pack one of Georgie's shoes before the wedding, but not the other one. You know, things like that. So she's fun to write about because you never know what she's going to. And the other thing is that she is someone who she's never learned to fit in with the class system. You know, I think she plays at being clueless, but she's often a lot smarter than she lets on. She's never learned to call Georgie my lady. She used to call her Miss, and she used to say, "Bob's your uncle, Miss," which is a Cockney expression meaning "okay, righto." But now that Georgie is married, she's switched to calling her Mrs. because she still hasn't learned to say "my lady." So, she's fun to write about.
Yeah, and she's a real character, so we can really, sometimes kind of identify with her. But, if people have any questions for Rhys or, what we're talking about, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them. Sorry if we're not, but please don't be afraid to do that. Ask anything. Probably haven't had a chance to read the book yet, or maybe some of you have, but Rhys will have signed copies at Book Passage. But if you want to ask about the previous Georgies, I think also what is so interesting, I mean, we talked a little bit about Chanel, but what is it with Chanel? I mean, a lot of women think, she's a name around the world. Everyone knows Chanel, Coco. And, and here we see her, we're not, and how do you account for this kind of fascination we all have with Chanel? How she became such a brand name?
Well, I mean, she's such an interesting life story to start with. The fact that she literally grew up in the gutter. You know, she was. I think her parents put her into an orphanage because they couldn't afford to keep her, and then she got apprenticed to a milliner, to a hat maker, and she showed such a flair that various upper class ladies said, "Oh, you can design a hat for me." And so, through meeting upper class ladies, she then learned to meet upper class men. And she very like Georgie's mother. She was another one who moved from man to man as it suited her. You know, she literally learned to work her way up very smoothly through society until the time I'm writing about, which is 1936.
Right.
She's been the mistress of the Duke of Westminster. And one of the things I love when I'm in the south of France, Villefranche-sur-Mer, is that his yacht is there. You can still see it. Someone owns it.
Wow. Someone bought it? Yeah.
But it's one of those, it looks like a small ocean liner. It's a steam yacht. And, Chanel used to be on that yacht with him and with Winston Churchill. And, so she literally moved from man to man very smoothly. And of course, the notorious one, which we won't get to in these books for a long time, is that during World War II, when the Germans occupied Paris, she became the mistress of a high-ranking Nazi, and thus was able to have a suite at the Ritz and to carry on designing clothes for the Nazi wives. So, I mean, that was bad enough, the fact that she managed smoothly to slip into this role of collaborator. And then, and she did try some real collaborating. She had a friend called Vera Bate Lombardi, who was related to the royal family in England. And she tried to get Vera to go over to London and try and negotiate with Winston Churchill for a peace. And luckily, Vera cottoned onto why Chanel wanted her back in Paris and didn't come, which was smart. And then after the war, when all the rest of the women who'd been collaborators had a terrible time, they brought them out, they shaved their heads, they tarred and feathered them, put them in jail. She just smoothly went along, and renewed her business and became an icon until she died, really. So the ultimate survivor.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a lovely question. It says, how long have you two been friends? And can you address the importance of a writer having a cheerleader? Oh, I don't. we've been friends for many years now, haven't we? Maybe 20? Yeah.
20, yeah. When my first book came out, Murder in the Marais, I think I did a Sisters in Crime event with you. Yeah. I don't know where, but I remember that. And I remember meeting you at Book Passage before my book came out, because there was a Sisters in Crime or a Mystery Writers of America meeting about what do you do before you get published. and you were on the panel and you talked about what do you do before you get published, which I was taking notes, which I still have. And I think I went up and tried to introduce myself and said, oh, I'm a newbie and all, but yeah, for a long time. And it's fun. I mean, we don't usually get to meet in Paris, but we did this time.
Well, we've
But
done lots of tours together. I mean, over the years, before we were, these days, if there is a tour, and it doesn't happen very often because the publishers now think that Zooming is a wonderful idea because they don't have to pay to send you somewhere. But Cara and I have done lots of fun tours together, and strange things have happened to us, and we can relate lots of very interesting stories of things that have happened in various parts of the world. We've even, I think our strangest probably was doing the event at the Naturalist Resort. Don't you think that was?
Oh yeah, tell the story. We
Yeah.
did a book. We were invited to talk to a book club, and it was down in the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Yeah.
And I don't know, last minute we heard that it was a naturist camp, which means nudist camp. And this was November, remember?
Yes.
It was cold.
We're driving there, and David Corbett, another excellent writer, was with us, and he was saying, I'm just going to read from my book and never look up the entire time. Anyway, so we get there, and luckily it is November, and most people are closed. Not all, but most people. So being Cara and David, they sort of said, Rhys, you're going to go with him. And I start to talk. In my books, blah, 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 I start to talk. This man walks across in front of me very slowly. He's quite a big man. He has a beard, and he's wearing a very small backpack. That's it. So I keep on very professionally keep on with my talk, and I try in my books to express that he walks all the way back again, very slowly, right in front of me. By this time, I think this must be deliberate. I am dying to say I've seen bigger and better, but I don't. But no.
And we were in a yurt. Remember, it was a yurt.
In a yurt, yeah. I mean, yeah, we have lots of stories to tell. We could keep you occupied for 2 hours on the Cara and Rhys show, but we've had some interestingly wonderful ones and some interestingly strange ones, haven't we?
We have driven, and yes, road trips, and yes, covered the state. But I think in our people we know, our circle, other people, I think everyone who writes, I mean, I don't think there's a sense of competition because we all write Rhys writes about Paris, so do I, but totally different books. There's no contest here, and I think it's fun to meet other people who do what you do. We're part of this tribe, and we get together and we share things. Unlike romance writers, no, joking,
but true.
That's what they,
yeah. No, I mean, I think that one of the great things when I started writing mysteries was the fact this great sisterhood and brotherhood, because the men are equally of fellow mystery writers. I mean, some of them you immediately click with and you become close friends, like me and Cara, but others just as professional friends, and everybody is so helpful. I couldn't believe to start with when my first mystery came out, which was in 1997. This is now my 50th, I should tell everybody, my 50th book. Yeah. But in 1997, when the first one came out, I got emails from quite famous writers saying, oh, I see you're going to be in such and such a town. Well, you should go to the bookstore there and tell them that I sent you. And it was, aren't we supposed to be rivals? And the answer is no. There is enough space for every book out there that is well written. That's the good thing, is we can promote each other, not to the detriment of ourselves, but to the enrichment of ourselves. If you like my books, then you'd also like blah, blah, and blah. If you like being in Paris with me, you're going to like being in Paris with Cara. That's one of the wonderful things about this. And you asked about being a cheerleader, Cheryl. You do need the support. Writing's a very lonely profession. As you know, we sit in a little room for days and only come out to get a cup of coffee. In Cara's case, it's espresso. I knew. To have someone to talk to. I mean, Cara and I often do. When I'm back in California, we meet and we brainstorm, and she'll say, so I've got this character and I've got her stuck in this room. And then And then, we talk about that. And you need someone to bounce ideas off, who's not going to be critical, who's not going to steal your ideas, and who's going to, help you work through things. So I'm really lucky in that I've got Cara, I've got the Jungle Red Writers. I do this blog called Jungle Red Writers, and there's 7 of us, and we chat all the time. And I've got various other mystery friends too. And it's wonderful to be in this wonderful group of cheerleaders, as you say.
And also, just to add to that, when anyone has a launch, in person, we go to each other's launches at Book Passage, because
Yeah.
that's just sort of what you do, as one does, because
Yeah.
that's what we do, and it's very pleasurable, So that was a great question. Going back to the book, there's several times that there's mentions, because it's 1936, of the World War One, because the characters in the book, especially is it Harry, who lives upstairs in Belinda's building? He's a veteran of World War One, and of course that whole generation, the lost generation, or whatever you want to call it, many of them are in Paris, and we of course that's all, we know about that through the books of Ernest Hemingway, who makes an appearance several times in this story. So you've got this also being brought up. That was the war to end all wars. And you have people who's, painting and writing, reflect that in who they are. And talk about, putting real characters in your story, like Ernest Hemingway, who comes a bit in love with himself.
I'm sure he was.
I'm sure he was, yeah.
Yeah. Well, talking about World War One, I have to write as if with no foreshadowing. I have no idea there's going to be a Second World War. I mean, we know that Germany is rearming itself, is trying to reassert itself. We know that Germany is not treating Jewish people very kindly, but we don't know what it's going to lead to. So I have to remember that none of my characters know that. And I think one of the things that was fun about writing this book is I've got the very haute couture life of Chanel. The people who come to her fashion show are the crowned heads of Europe, the very rich women of Europe. And then we've got the man that we meet who lives in the attic upstairs in Belinda's building. And he's one of these people who stayed on in France after World War II and World War One, and has had, obviously a sensitive guy who's been really shocked by what he experienced in the trenches. And he's a would-be writer. He gets little writing assignments every now and then, but not enough to live on. And through him, we meet the group of expat writers and painters and things who meet at one of the cafes. And I'd always thought, Cara, don't you think this would be good? We don't get that anymore, like to sit with a group of people and just discuss literature and art all day. I wonder if they really were as intense and creative as we expect that they were. How they sit there and say, do you feel it here when you write a poem that I've written? Or do you think they really sit and say, I found a wonderful place for cheap wine around the corner if you're interested? Because that's what we do when we meet, we don't
right,
talk.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But I'd always wanted to do that. I mean, all those cafes, they do Mago, and all of them, they're still there. And I was
still there.
The other day, I went past several, and I said to John, "Oh yeah, well that was where Degas used to sit. You can probably see him sitting there still." So that's one of the things I love with Paris, is that there is that complete cafe culture where still you can get a cup of coffee, you can sit on the sidewalk and watch the world go by, and no one will come and ask you to move on. You could sit there
all day. Yeah, all day. Exactly. But Rhys, just thinking about what you said, of course, in those days, like living in a garret, there wasn't heat, or, it was stifling during the summer when there was a heat wave. They had lived in tiny places. I mean, Parisian apartments still are very small. So there is that vibrant cafe culture, right? Where people go out, especially after COVID, they just wanted to go out, and sit on the corner or just sit outside on the terrace. So I would think at that time they probably used the cafes more of a living room, because they didn't have televisions or Netflix or, heat, you know what I mean? And so that was a meeting place, I think.
And presumably they always hoped that one of their friends would have a little more money than them, would treat them to that croissant, that second cup of coffee, you know, to keep the wolf from the door. But you asked about real characters. I think in all of the books, I'm writing about a real place, a real time. So it's sort of fun to bring in real people who would have been there. We've got Chanel, who plays quite a big part in this. And she came into another book before called Naughty in Nice.
Right.
And so I had done a lot of research on her before. And so it's fun to bring her there. I think one of the things I try and do is if I have a real character, I want them to say and think things they really did. I don't want to take a real character and then turn them into a fictional one. I want a real person to do a cameo appearance on the page. So in this book, we go to Harry, this would-be writer, takes us to the soiree at Gertrude Stein's. And we meet Gertrude and we meet Alice B. Toklas. And then Hemingway pops in for a quick visit. And he's no longer living in Paris. He's a celebrity now already, but he's on his way to Spain to report on the Civil War. So we've tied in time again to let us know what's happening in the world. And we can see he really is rather in love with himself. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really great. Because I remember once walking by the apartment, or they had the plaque or something, and I was like, oh, so this is where they all came. This was the famous, and it looks so small, maybe the egos filled it, but I think there's another question and I can't read it. I'm sorry.
It says, are you going to collaborate with your daughter on a new book in the near future? How does that parent-child relationship work? Oh, that's a good question. This is not my Royal Spyness series. This is my other series, Molly Murphy, who is an Irish woman in New York in the early 1900s. And I had put that series on hold for a while because I'd done 17 books. And I'm now writing a big standalone historical novel each year, which, is 400 or 500 pages and takes quite a lot of work. So I just didn't have time to do that third book in a year. So I put it on hold and I kept getting all these messages. When is there going to be another Molly book? We miss Molly. And my daughter came to me a couple of years ago, my daughter Claire, and she said, I'd really like to write the Molly. I think we could resurrect the Molly series. I'd really like to write with you. And I was a little ambivalent about this because, she's my daughter and I love her. And I thought, well, what if this doesn't work out well? What if I have to say, I'm sorry, you just don't get the writing style? But I knew she could write. I knew she was a good writer. But it worked out brilliantly. She came in, really hit the ground running. Before she started, she just read all 17 books again. So she came in with Molly's voice perfect. She's the sort of person, when it comes to reading, I've never seen a faster reader than her. I know once I got an advanced copy of the Da Vinci Code and I gave it to her and I said, this is going to be big, And about 3 hours later, she came back and said, yeah, this wasn't bad. And I said, you can't have finished it yet. She said, yes, I finished it. Anyway, so she'd read all 17 Molly books and she came in with Molly's voice perfect. The first person book, she came in Molly's voice perfectly. She came in with a great idea for plot for that first book. She said, we haven't seen Molly for a while. We need to remind people how she got to New York. So we set another mystery on Ellis Island, which is how she came to New York. And so we finished the second book and that comes out next March. And that is called All That Is Hidden. And we're just finishing up the third book now. And it's going to be set in the Catskill Mountains at the very beginning of one of the Jewish bungalow colonies. In the beginning of that century, the people who had money in New York would go to one of the resorts, Newport, Rhode Island, or one of those places. And they soon find out, Jewish people soon find out they're not welcome. You could have all the money you wanted and no Jews were allowed. So they chose their own places to get out of the city. And there were Jewish small farmers in the Catskills who found they could make a little extra money by putting some cottages on their property, and people would go up for the summer. And just like they used to out of San Francisco, go to Clear Lake and places, the whole family would go up and live in one of these cottages. And the father would come up at weekends. So this is the very beginning of it. There's a relative of one of our characters owns the farm and they've got a few people staying there. So Molly finds herself up there. So we did a lot of lot of research into the whole thing, and that's a lot of fun. And I have a Jewish friend in New York who's really very well connected. And so I said to her, we're going to bounce this book off you to make sure that everything is correct. And this is going to be Catskills, early Jewish colonies. And she said, I do know Grossigan's grandson, if that's going to be any help. Like, yeah, that might be some help. So she's got it now. So we'll hear what things she says we've got right and what we didn't get right. So that's book number 3. And
is that when they do the beginning of the Borscht Belt circuit? When they had where many Jewish entertainers got started, or was that a bit later? Right?
Well,
entertainment.
It's just about to start. In fact, one of the characters that we meet has visions for the future and says, we should bring up some of the entertainers from the Yiddish theater in New York. And so we're foreshadowing what's going to happen next. But at the moment I've got it, it's still very primitive. You come up, and the thing is, they came up and they like to play at being farmer. They like to help milk the goats and that sort of thing. So and we see how this might be going in the future, but at the moment it's still very simple.
And talking about points of view and first person point of view, Georgie books are kind of like diary entries, in a orienting us right away. Wednesday, April 23rd at Belinda's flat, and then at the house of the Countess de Montaigu, having dinner. And I really like you're just framing that, chapter scene, and we're seeing it. And was that always, I know many years ago when the first Georgie came out, you said you wanted to write Georgie because you wanted someone who was maybe irreverent, who, had an outsider look at the class system, coming from also humble beginnings, and just doing something light. So can you talk about that? Because I remember.
That was funny because I started Georgie because my editor kept saying to me, we can't really break you out unless you write as a big, dark, standalone novel.
Right.
I kept trying to come up with ideas. I kept thinking, oh God, serial killers, child molesters, terrorists. And then you turn on the television and everything was so dark. And I thought, do I really want to spend 6 months in darkness? And then I thought, okay, what would be the most unlikely heroine I could come up with? I thought, how about if she's royal, but she's penniless? How does she survive? And it's the 1930s, that wonderful time they called the long weekend, poised between 2 world wars, when you had these incredible contrasts. You had the Great Depression, you had men standing in a line for soup, and then you had Bertie Wooster drinking champagne from a yacht on the Med. You have incredible division between haves and have-nots. You had communists and fascists fighting for power all over Europe. So really interesting time to write about real history. So I thought, I'm going to make her related to the royal family in the 1930s. And of course, we showed it to my publisher, who went, no, that wasn't what we wanted at all. No. So it went out to another publisher, and then and the rest is history. And I've been smiling ever since. So that was good.
I know. Though there is, as we talked about yesterday, it is getting a bit darker. Of course, we're, because you're using real events and real times in history, and any thoughts about what happens next? Well, of course, the baby, I suppose, will be born.
Yeah, mentioning what gets darker in the book. Yeah, each of the books, I think, because it's real history and because Georgie's in a real place with a real time, we are becoming more aware. To start with, in these books, people thought Hitler was a joke. People talked about, oh, that funny little man with his moustache, isn't he pathetic? And now, of course, we know what's going on in Germany, and we know that things are not looking as good there. And so we're seeing it. I want my reader to make up their own minds about, I never want to tell people what's happening. I want them to make up their own minds about what's happening. And Georgie's mother comes into this book because Georgie's mother has come as a part of a trade delegation from Germany with Max, her beloved, and he's trying to sell the French-German automobiles. And she's come with a group of the women, and they're going to be going to the fashion show at Chanel. And Georgie meets her mother at Chanel, and they have a lovely little session together. And then her mother says, well, I must fly now, darling, but come and have lunch at the Ritz. And when she's ready to leave, a woman steps out of the next cubicle and says, are you ready to go now, Frau? And Georgie realizes her mother has a minder. And then Georgie's getting this feeling, Germany is not a safe place anymore. And her mother may be trapped there. So I planted this seed for, I don't know what would happen in future books, but I planted the seed, what might happen if she doesn't come back.
Right. And we have Frau Goring, right? What's his name? Goring, whatever forget his first name. Yeah, Goring is there. I mean, he loved the Ritz. We know he stayed there during the war.
That's right. Yes, so his wife comes, and she comes, and that Georgie's mother is sort of tacking on to this group. She doesn't get along that well with them because she doesn't speak very good German. She and Max, I don't know how they communicate, but they do. But her German's not brilliant, so she's sort of tagged along with this group. But there are various other people in this group who might be of great interest to somebody. I'm not going to say any more because there is an element of, what shall we say, intrigue in this book, which is going to be in the middle. So we've got a slightly scarier plot than we sometimes have. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but we
no, you have to read the book. Yeah, but I think what you're also doing is seeding it very well. You have to read this to find out, of course. But I think what you're saying is so true, because when the Germans just marched in and occupied Paris and took it over like that, everyone was, how could they do that? Why did everyone flee? Well, they had done their homework. You know, they had been there before. They had, planted people. So you do it very well here. We can see this. They didn't just march in. They had seeded people and knew what was going on. So that's really great.
An interesting thing, by the way, was my mother during the 1930s had a German pen pal from school. And this girl and my mother were quite friendly and wrote to each other. And then the girl wrote to my mother and said, could you send me some maps of your area? I'd love to know exactly where you live. So that's what they were doing. They were suggesting children started doing the reconnaissance for them. Very interesting.
That's brilliant. And it probably worked, in many cases. And, what better way, what innocent way to just start getting all kinds of information.
Yeah.
That's, I know the SOE did that later, when they were going to drop agents in France. They were asking people, do you have photos of or postcards, that would show this area, and people would show them, because they didn't have they had some aerial photography, right? But not a lot. So.
Yeah, they did have some aerial photography.
Yeah.
And I've seen some of those maps. I don't know if you've been to the Spy Museum in Washington, but they have a wonderful exhibit there of all the things that were used in World War II when they dropped spies behind the lines. And one of the things they had was they would print their maps on little tiny squares of silk that you could fold up and put into a fake lipstick. So, they had lots of good stuff.
They did. Oh, I love that place. Yeah, it's tons of things that are really fun.
Yeah.
So Paris, you always have these incredible places, like Paris is the setting for this story. Can you give us a clue or a hint to where the next Georgie will be set? Or maybe I don't know, a hint?
Yeah,
or is that top secret?
Yes. I mean, Paris was wonderful to write about, especially because I'm writing about it during the pandemic when I couldn't travel. So just to live there vicariously for a while was really nice. I enjoyed that. But now George is going to be stuck at home for the next book because there is a little Omara due fairly soon. So she's not allowed to travel anymore. So the next book takes place at her own house and at another big house nearby. And Georgie very, very cleverly at the end of this book, you'll find out, manages to hire a chef. She's had Queenie cooking for them, which is okay sometimes, not always. And the owner of the house is coming back and expects there to be a chef there. So she manages to find a chef who then arrives and is awfully good. And they give a dinner party for neighbors. And one of the neighbors is a sort of over-the-top person, male writer. I think you and I have met them. You go to the conventions and there's always the male writer whose hair is a little too long and who poses at the bar, and walks past like, aren't I wonderful, darling, stand out of the way. So he's he's a male writer who writes these very dark and scary books about, you know, the supernatural and possession and demons and vampires and mysterious crimes. And he has bought a nearby manor house. And one of the reasons he's bought it is because it has a poison garden. And I've been to a poison garden in England, and they're fabulous. It's all the plants that can kill somebody. So he wants to have a banquet, and he's going to borrow Georgie's chef. What could go wrong? That's all I'm
What
saying.
could go wrong? Yeah, but of course, you know, the men we meet who are very peacocky like that are the exception to the rule. I mean, usually crime writers are very different. So those type of people stand out a lot. Is there a question or a comment?
There's another interesting question here. It says, since you're both British and American, can you give us your feelings on the passing of the Queen? What do Americans not truly understand about this traumatic event? I think Americans understood really well. I was lucky enough to be in London when she died. I had arrived literally an hour before, and we traveled with my daughter and son-in-law, and they'd gone out for a bite to eat. And I got a ping on my phone, and I picked it up, and it says the Queen has just died. And Jane came in at the same time, and she had her phone. She said, "Mum, the Queen's just died." And instantly, the whole of London was transformed. Jane and Tom went down to Buckingham Palace and watched this huge mound of flowers growing and everybody crying. And this standing in silence, people just standing in silence outside Buckingham Palace. And the next day, I had to have lunch with the people who were hoping to make the Constable Evans series for TV. And so I had lunch at BAFTA with them. And I was walking down Piccadilly, and all the shops had their windows draped in black, and they had big signs out saying, you know, in honor of Her Majesty, what a wonderful life, etc. Some of the shops had signs on the door saying, we will be closed for the period of mourning, which was 10 days. Everywhere you went, the bells were tolling like once a minute. So you'd be walking through London and you'd hear dong, dong. It was just so moving because everybody in London was affected. And then when you saw television, you knew that everybody around the world was equally affected. I think the thing that touched me most was looking at one of the American football stadiums, and they were about to have a football game with like 60, 70,000 people there. And they said, we will have a minute of silence for the passing of Her Majesty the Queen.
Oh.
There was complete and utter silence. Everybody just stood. And I thought, this is a woman who was really respected everywhere.
Around the world, yeah.
And the interesting thing, Cara, was that I got so many messages, because I write this series, you know, which is about the royal family. I got so many messages from people saying, I am so sorry for your loss. As if it was my loss, you know, I mean, instead of everybody's loss. And I think my answer to that was, you know, I'm not at all sorry, because I think we should give thanks that she died with all her faculties. She died the day before she met the new Prime Minister at Balmoral. She was up and around doing her duty.
Right. The day before, I remember, yeah.
She was at Balmoral, a place she loved. She had Charles and Anne with her. And I think the time was right. I think that obviously she missed Philip terribly because he died during the middle of a pandemic. So she was pretty much stuck on her own at Windsor Castle. I think she was incredibly lonely. That picture that must have touched everybody's hearts at his funeral, where she's sitting all alone without someone to put a hand on her knee or just comfort her or something. So I think, you know, for her, the time was right. I had a friend who said, I'm really surprised that she died. She said, I thought she would have made it to 100. She used to love nice, neat, round numbers. So, but no, I think it was the time she wanted to go. And what better way could you go than having done your duty the day before? And
exactly. I mean, yeah. I mean, I went to Paris. I got there a few days after that, but my friends were in London. I was hearing all about, you know, but it was very traditional, like from what you said. But to me, it was like she just let go. It was time.
Yeah.
You know, she knew what she was doing. She let go. She'd done what she needed, and of course now you have a new prime minister. But anyway,
yeah. She didn't last long.
Yeah, she didn't last long, but you know, she'd done her duty, and yeah, she touched everyone. We started watching The Crown last night, the newest, you know, so it takes up in the Años Horribles, the new season.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that one, whatever you feel, but it
so
was,
the new
but
round has started, has it? Oh, I've got to watch.
yes, that's
Yeah,
the new crown. Yeah,
yeah.
but I looked at it and I thought she's on the throne for another 30 years after this. You
Yeah.
know, it was amazing when you look back with all the Diana issues and the Windsor burning and stuff. So, but that she lived, you know, she ruled for another 30 years
Well, I still
after
can't
this.
get used to saying King Charles III because for my whole life it was Queen. It was God save the Queen. You know,
Right, right. Different era, right? Different time. But
amazing. Yeah.
yeah. Any
So,
other comments or questions? I cannot see there.
well, Cheryl has come back to us too. Hi, Cheryl.
Ladies, what a wonderful hour. Boy, and the book again, Peril in Paris. Can someone hold do we have a copy of it to hold up? Yes. Thank you, Cara. And of course we have Cara's book too, the Versailles, we have that in stock in Book Passage. We have Rhys's book, Peril in Paris. These ladies write so many books and we have them all in stock at Book Passage. So please come on and visit us and pick up one of these amazing mysteries. If holidays are coming up, there's not a better gift around. Get some books for your loved ones. And I just want to thank you, the both of you, such good friends of Book Passage, always having your book launches with us, always promoting us, and of course, you know, being such an integral part of our Mystery Writers Workshop. We could not put on these events without you. Thank you, Cara. Thank you, Rhys. And again, your books are treasured by our community. Thank you for continuing to write them. And for those of you, again, they're all in stock at Book Passage. So come on in and we will load you up with some amazing mysteries. Thank you.
Wonderful stocking stuffers. Stocking stuffers. Well, I don't fit in a big stocking.
And Cara's 3 hours in Paris behind. If you want the ultimate thriller set in Paris, that's it. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Cara, for talking. Thank you, Cheryl, for hosting us.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Rhys.
And thank you to our Book Passage community for tuning in. Again, we can offer these events that are mostly free because you buy your books at Book Passage. So thank you again, and we will see you next time. Good afternoon.
Bye, everybody. Bye.